Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Sasa. I make videos on Rwandan politics. Excuse the voice. We're in a pandemic, and I think Omicron is going through Canada right now. As the year end, as the end of the year is here, I wanted to make a video for the diaspora again, for the young ones. I keep getting asked this question: what interested you in Rwandan politics? Um, so I'm here to sort of answer that. Um, so yes, let's get in. For me, I would say what interests me in Rwandan politics is the racism. It is the racist ideology that bystanders who aren't part of the community or diaspora see it. Um, and many in our age ask, why should we care? You know, we live in the West, far away from the inkotanyi regime. Um, we were able to get an education. We were raised away from beatings. So I keep coming back to this thought that there is nothing special about us. You know, we're simply the lucky ones. Um, and so I come to ask myself this question, a challenge I keep meeting. How do I maintain and save my humanity, while fighting those who oppress it? I have few things I wanted to go through to explain a little bit about this racism and my thesis on it and what I do think about it. There's some historical perspectives. I learned about the monarchy. Um, I learned about the Inkotanyi paradise. They call it their land of milk and honey. The late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, he has a quote where he says, "When we see others as the enemy, we risk becoming what we hate. When we oppress others, we end up oppressing ourselves. All of our humanity is dependent upon recognizing the humanity in others." This is a thing that's very difficult for Rwandan politicians and just Rwandan elites to really understand. In his memoir, An Ordinary Man, Paul Rusesabagina, he described the problem really simply. The problem stems from words and beliefs. In his book, he quotes, the Hutus have been told over and over again that they were uglier and stupider than the Tutsis. They were told that they would never be as physically attractive or as capable of running the affairs of the country. It was a really poisonous stream of rhetoric, and it was designed to reinforce the power of the elite. Um, in the diaspora, in nearly all corners of the world, you always find two Rwandan communities. One that I label as a mixed community, where you find Hutus um, and Tutsis, many times being the women they married or mixed families, etc. And then you will also find a small Tutsi community. I always thought this was due to the trauma of the Civil War and the genocide. Maybe it's too painful to be around those who look like the people who killed your family members or who put you through a lot of suffering. Perhaps. That was until this year. Until I recently heard um, from a man named James Kabarebe. Mr. Kabarebe is a Rwandan military officer. He served as a senior and serves as a senior president advisor in the government of Rwanda. So he was speaking to a large group of young Rwandan youth who were mostly of the Tutsi ethnicity. And he was explaining to them the danger that the refugees outside the country pose to them. And he points out to them that when he's traveling across Southern Africa, when he goes to top universities, top schools, many of the students who are up there in the, best performers, last names are Mana, Singas, Muka, Shimwes. These are all Rwandan last names, but also these are stereotypical Rwandan Hutu names. So here is a general of the Rwandan military telling the next generation from the Tutsi ethnicity to prepare themselves to battle physically, mentally, and even politically with other Rwandan refugees, clustered across Africa. That to me was really sad, and but then I noticed that This is not hatred or fear or trauma. This is just plain race supremacy. This is the doctrine of inkotanyi is that Rwanda is their birthright. It was gained when Tutsi kings conquered the Hutu chiefs and kingdoms. This birthright gives them a right to the land, its resources and wealth, and most importantly, the subjugation of the Bantu and the Pygmy tribes found on the land. This is just simple race superiority. Inkotanyi almost speak as if they believe in this mandate from heaven. They claim it grants them the right to rule Rwanda as they see fit. To understand, they do not see the Bantu Hutus or the Pygmy Twas as human equals. Is so they don't see them as capable of the same intellectual ability and thought. To those Tutsi extremists who live in this racist ideology, Hutus are a form of livestock, with a specialty in that Hutus have thumbs, and they can speak the human language, so they can communicate. The beautiful thing about modern Rwanda for the RPF regime is that there is no longer race or ethnicity. They criminalized, pointing out any form, any race, and whatnot. With the idea that you can remove the words to describe a racist system. With the idea that if you do remove the words to describe a racist system, then perhaps the system can secretly survive. This month I was reading a bit on apartheid. What's surprising to me is that the system of segregation, it didn't start out as a full-blown racial segregation project. Rather, the laws that would protect, white political and economic power further created social segregation. First, it's economic segregation that's followed by further social disintegration. So Rwanda is now an apartheid state to me. We see it in its living conditions, education, access to life essentials, and even physical safety. In Mr. Kabarebe's speech, you realize, this is a type of transactional racism. For inkotanyi, their successes are measured based on the failures of the Hutu and Twa. This is where the idea of strangers succeeding in Malawi or Zimbabwe, Zambia, becomes a threat, where sabotage as policy is required. So for Inkotanyi, it's like the outright crushing of the Bantu people and the spirit that they aim for. It's so odd to me for a country's leadership to be working on the underdevelopment of the majority of their population. And a disturbing trend has come out of all this, where the Rwandan people ask the government for basic needs, such as, can we have food? Can we have access to nutritious food? And they are hit with a reply, so you hate Tutsis? They ask, can we have education and a dignified position in society? And the government says, so you hate Tutsis? The people ask, can we have safety? Can we have guarantees for equal representation in court? And the government hits us back with, are you racist? Do you hate Tutsis? This has created censorship that is quite frightening. In Rwanda, this conversation is illegal. It falls under divisionism and genocide ideology. Anyone that points out the growing segregation of Rwandan society is called a racist and a genocidaire. And I mean, that's obvious. It's because for Inkotanyi, separate but equal, it's like their mantra. To them, Rwandan society is going back to its natural state. And for them, this natural state is feudalism. And this is why they hate the colonialist. The Rwandan government and the ideologues, they hate colonialists in a different way than other African Pan-Africanists. For them, the colonialists are seen as destroying their 400-year year old monopoly and monarchy. And most, and I think most unforgivably, they educated the Hutu ethnicity. This educating of the Hutus, it destroyed the kingdom. It destroyed the king. It ended serfdom, and that's where modern neoliberalism and capitalism comes from. With capitalism, you can recreate those social inequalities, but then pretend it's all about money. It's not about policy. And this is all very heavy, and it really sounds really extreme. And for most people our age, they'll have trouble believing it. It's hard to accept that there's a country in which your humanity is not only up for debate, but it's been settled already. It's been settled that you're not quite the same as other human beings. It leaves me cold to know that I am more human, I am more respected within Canada than my home country. Um, but this is now becoming global. James Kabarebe's family now lives in Canada. Many Rwandan leaders' children and spouses live in Canada. And I have to wonder, do they see Canadian Bantus as people? Do they bring that racist ideology over? If they access a service in Canada and they're met with a Bantu person, do they leave? Do they ask for a different server if the person they is serving them they suspect might be a Hutu? How will this affect the lives of Canadians who are of Rwandan descent? How will this affect us? You know, uh, this all brings me back to the separate Rwandan communities across the world. When it first dawned on me, I was really saddened. So, this all brings me back to the separate Rwandan communities across the world. When I was first a kid and I noticed how separated they are, I was really saddened, mainly because of the mixed connections. I think it's really weird that right now there are two Canadian boys. They live and grow in the same city, same area of town, probably the same school district. They're into the same sports. They live in the same culture. They'll probably one day meet at a basketball meet or a soccer meet, and they'll get along. They'll be friends, but never will their Rwandan heritage meet. And if anything, if their Rwandan heritage meets, will it survive? And thinking about that now, even as I'm much older, it still very much saddens me. I recently learned about two different situations um, that have kind of challenged my wishes for a mixed Rwandan diaspora. The first was Manny Martin. He is a Rwandan singer songwriter and performing artist. He's won quite a few numerous awards across Africa. Manny Martin this year recently spoke about his struggle with breaking out in the music industry in Rwanda. Um, Lots of people would remind him like that he's really good and talented, but that his ethnicity, he's a Hutu, that's gonna hold him back. That's gonna limit him. And they would tell him this as a kindness, Don't expect too much, Manny. Just don't get your hopes up. People would say, "Wow, you're so talented. If only you weren't Umuhutu." And so seeing a young man in his 20s, oh, actually, I believe in his 30s, speaking about this in modern Rwanda is beyond soul crushing. If the country you're born in, live in, cannot see people like you as artists, as people capable of creating beauty, that is just it's it's beyond sad. It's a level of discrimination and racism that even for me as a minority who has grown up in Western society, I'm struggling to understand. But the one social situation that really stayed with me was of Miss Josiane Mwiseneza. Josiane, again, is also Rwandan born and raised. Um, she is a young woman in her 20s, and in 2019, she entered the Miss Rwanda competition. I don't know Josiane's ethnicity, and the competition doesn't really ask for it. But this is where those social little agreements start to sneak in. During the process, they posted pictures of the contestants on Instagram on the Miss Rwanda page. This was the first time in my entire life as a black woman that I saw other black people, but particularly other black women, calling another black person an ape and gorilla. The dehumanization. It's one of those moments in Rwandan politics and history. It just stops time for me. Comparing black people to animals, looking at those emojis of monkeys, it all made so much perfect sense. The people in those comments do not see Hutus as human beings. I don't know what Miss Josiane is. I don't know what her ethnicity is. But Miss Josiane was not a Tutsi. And for that, she was mocked, insulted. You know, in Josiane's story, I think of the black American women who have raised many African children in books, in their works. I grew up with Audre Lorde, but mostly Bell Hooks, an American writer, human rights campaigner, feminist, somebody who has impacted so many black women's lives. And in Josiane's story, Bell Hooks' words came back to my ears. And they say, I will not have my life narrowed down. I will not bow down to somebody else's whim or to someone else's ignorance. Happy New Year to all of Rwandan. We're going to the year 2022, for which I believe, as in the diaspora, we owe those who cannot leave. We owe them a service. And we must take all the lessons from Archbishop Tutu, from Bell Hooks, from all the great Pan-Africanists and human rights activists before us. They all have always chosen to maintain their humanity and to fight for the humanity of others. Happy New Year.